Today, I have a very important topic for you. I am going to dive even deeper into the fear discussion. My goal is to emphasize the importance of facing your fears so you can actually dissipate them in a super effective manner. So, the previous video I made about fears and negative thoughts was mostly about redirecting your mind in the moment so you don't spiral when those fears and negative thoughts come up. Although the method I shared was very powerful, keep in mind that was just a surface level conscious approach. It's still not going to get rid of the fear itself on a deeper subconscious level. So therefore, in this video, I will share with you a method that's incredibly effective for dissipating any strong fear that you have. My background is in neuroscience and cognition, so I'm definitely aware of just how effective this is. So my name is Tia. I absolutely love conscious manifestation. It's helped me develop a deeper understanding about myself and why certain patterns kept pushing out in my reality. I've managed to turn my life around, and I'd really like to share some insights that I've gained along the way. So, in the law of assumption community, many coaches tell us to essentially ignore and be delusional to our fears, our negative thoughts, and our 3D. But a lot of us struggle with keeping a mental diet because it can often feel like work. This is because we are treating the symptom instead of the root cause. We think if we just affirm against our fears or do another technique, then that fear will be gone if we just persist in it enough. And this might be so. I cannot speak for everyone, but I can speak for myself. When I first started on my manifestation journey, I found that I had a fear of abandonment. So I started affirming something along the lines of, everyone I love stays with me, and I persisted in this affirmation over a significant period of time. And truthfully, I saw it reflected back to me. I even felt better, but I could still sense that the wound was there. And I honestly thought to myself, okay, this might take some time. I mean, I've been living with this wound for my entire life, so that makes sense why there's parts of it that are still present. I was totally accepting of the time that it could take to get over this, and I was like, time doesn't even matter because I love myself enough to persist in my new identity. But then I remembered the nature of fears and everything I learned about fears in my studies. So with strong fears, it's usually not enough to only do conscious level stuff. We really do need to reach that subconscious mind. This is going to sound super counterintuitive, but just hear me out. I say all this because sometimes you cannot overwrite your old programming by only doing mental techniques such as affirmations and visualizations or whatever else you do. So let's say you have a strong rejection fear. Most of the time, it is not enough to just affirm things like, I am chosen and I am wanted, especially when you have a very strong and very old rejection fear, or any other strong fears for that matter. You might even think that the new affirmations are replacing the assumptions about your fears, but that is actually incorrect. Your mind can hold two opposing thoughts at the same time. This is what we refer to as cognitive dissonance, and it causes that mental discomfort you feel when you have negative thoughts and fears come up while you're supposed to be persisting in your new identity. Let's stick to our example. If you have a strong rejection fear, but you're also affirming for your new identity, and you're saying stuff like, I am wanted, my presence is cherished, and I am pursued, you might receive glimpses of your 3D reflecting your affirmations back to you. But at the same time, you were still housing your old fear because you really didn't do anything to address it or get rid of it. All you did was add new affirmations thinking they're supposed to get rid of the old fear. Personally, I don't think this is a good approach to conscious manifestation because it's similar to sweeping your mess under the rug. Although you can't see it, it's still there. Think about it. It's difficult to build a strong and beautiful house over a shaky foundation. If you want to make long-lasting and permanent changes in your life, you have to address the foundation. And yes, you do have to change that old foundation, but you can only do that by destroying it first. Only then can you build a beautiful, strong house that's going to last you a lifetime. Actually, more than a lifetime, because this stuff trickles down and influences the generations to come. And I honestly suspect that's why people say they still get triggered by their old stuff, even though it's been months or even years since they changed. They're probably not manifesting from the wound as much as they used to because they have had much practice with redirecting their mind. But I still suspect that parts of the fear are still intact. And this is just my hypothesis. Also, I just want to say that I agree you can transform by doing mental techniques such as affirming and visualizing alone, but what I am questioning is the degree of change. How much did you change exactly? I see it as very common for people practicing the law of assumption to fall out of their wish-fulfilled state far too frequently. I see this a lot online because I'm in a few law of assumption groups, and I see this a lot with people manifesting their specific person, and this makes a lot of sense because our specific person tends to trigger our deepest wounds. But people say things like, I was doing just fine, I felt great, but then I saw my specific person, or I ran into my specific person, my SP contacted me, and now I feel triggered all over again. And this makes sense why this would happen, because I think the fear is still there, or at least parts of it. When doing this kind of work, we should not lull ourselves into a false sense of security. Seriously, do not underestimate the power of your subconscious mind. It really wants you to think you're all good because it's not a fan of change. This is interesting to me because why isn't transformation lasting for many people? And like I said, I personally believe this is because they haven't really transformed. Well, not as much as they think they have. They haven't really eliminated that fear. So for me, I thought to myself, there's gotta be a more effective way for dissipating these fears, because chances are if you have an old dysfunctional subconscious program that's running, it's most likely going to take over. It'll hold you back when you're trying to make improvements in your life. It'll tempt you to revert to your previous state. So we are going to have to work with our subconscious mind and not against it. Remember, the things you resist tend to persist. Trust me, by the end you're going to know how to stop being scared for good. And this is great because what you're not scared of will no longer be a problem in your reality because you've canceled it. It's been neutralized. Here's the thing about fears that the manifestation community often gets wrong. Fears are not just a mental process alone. I know what you're thinking, that's not true, the fears I have are all in my head. Well, yes and no. You have to realize that fears have an associated physiological effect. Fears are bodily experiences just as much as they are mental events. Your mind is not the only thing that is causing you psychological distress. And you know this is true because you have experienced your body reacting to the experience of your fears. Think about it. Have you ever been rejected or felt you were going to get abandoned? Can you remember how your body felt during these times? I mean, you can even be out and about, minding your business, with no perceived danger in sight, but for some reason you might find yourself to be hyper vigilant. You might notice that your body is extremely tense. You could become hyper aware of your surroundings. You find yourself in a state of high anxiety where your heart's pounding and you're sweating and you have that sudden urge to flee. I mean, some people even dissociate, even though, like I said, there is no perceived danger. That is because there are things outside of your conscious awareness that are being perceived as threats, which are making your body react this way. With the law of assumption, we're usually focused on the mental aspect of conscious manifestation. We hear things all the time like deny the senses, ignore your 3D, don't give in to your negative thoughts, just go to your imagination, live in the end. And this is correct. Conscious manifestation is definitely a mental process. I am not negating this whatsoever. However, that is the mechanics of conscious manifestation alone. But to successfully divorce yourself from your fears, you have to cut the mind-body connection that exists between them. Okay, you really have to sever it. And a lot of people miss this in the law of assumption community. I understand it's because fears are misunderstood and not many people have studied the nature of fears. The element that is often forgotten about fears is that they are also experienced by our bodies. The practice of the law of assumption alone takes place in your headspace alone. You go into your imagination and you give yourself the inner experience you want through whatever technique you use. Then your desire materializes in the 3D. This is pretty basic and easy stuff we all agree on. But there's a nuance here. This works for the individual that lacks fear and negative thoughts in the area they're manifesting in. We know this is true because we've all manifested things we're not resistant to, such as coffee, flowers, a phone call, a text message, and so on. But when you do have fears around the things you're trying to manifest, as you know, this becomes a significantly harder process. The physiological experiences of fears do nothing but to reaffirm them. So we have to cut the cord between the mental and physical experience of the fear. If you want to learn more about this topic, I suggest you read the book The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. You can even do a simple Google search about somatic therapy. Sometimes it's referred to as somatic psychology or somatic experiencing, but they're pretty much referring to the same thing. Somatic approaches were initially developed to help trauma survivors, but are now used for a lot more than that. And keep in mind, trauma looks very different on everyone. Like, the experience of trauma is not only limited to people that were in a chaotic war zone. For example, childhood emotional neglect is very traumatizing to a child's brain because the innate need for connection was not met. There are so many traumatizing things that occur, but they're easily overlooked and not labeled as trauma. You have to realize that trauma actually alters the brain's chemistry and wiring, so it definitely does change the brain on a physiological level. Also, keep in mind the presence of strong debilitating fears is indicative of past trauma, so I think it's a good idea to broaden our understanding of trauma. Okay, so let's get into our method. Like I said, this method is seemingly counterintuitive, but it's very intentional. So just give it a chance, especially if you're one of those people that are like, therapy doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. You're wrong. It does work. You just have to find a good therapist. Okay, so this is going to be a form of exposure therapy with some borrowed pendulation elements, but it's mostly focused on exposure. If you don't know anything about exposure therapy, this is a technique a therapist will use to help a patient overcome whatever fears they have. The way this is done is by exposing the patient to the fearful stimulus, and it is always done in a safe environment. The idea is, by facing the thing you fear, you cannot avoid it anymore. You realize you are more than capable of confronting your fears, therefore you will feel at ease around your fears to the point where they deeply do not mean anything to you anymore. So this is how you're going to execute this. Side note, I will never say not to see a mental health professional. Always seek professional help when you need it. But I am encouraging you to step out of your comfort zone because that's usually when the most growth happens. Okay, so now I'm going to do my best to describe what I want you to do. So you want to intentionally set aside some time for this and mentally prepare yourself for this experience. Before going into the exercise, pick one fear you'd like to dissipate. Make sure you won't be disturbed because you are going to be in a vulnerable state. So I need you to find a safe place. I want you to lie down or sit, just as long as you are relaxed. If any thoughts come up in your mind, do not follow them or interact with them. Simply observe them and they will pass. I say this because, 1, I don't want you to work your way out of your relaxed state, and 2, I want you to be out of your head so that you can really feel your body. Take as much time as you need. I want you to notice the sensations all over your body, starting at your toes and making your way up. Notice any tightness and tension. Pay attention to where those sensations are. So all you're doing is becoming more and more aware of your body and taking note of any sensations. Again, take as much time as you need. I really want you out of your headspace as much as possible because the purpose of this activity is meant to release the fears from your body. This is not a mental exercise whatsoever. When you're ready, I want you to bring up the feeling of your fear. For example, if you pick the fear of abandonment, you would ask yourself, what would it feel like to be abandoned? And you would ask yourself this question over and over again. I do not want you to answer this question. I do not want you to mentally engage with it. All I want is for you to keep asking yourself this question until you feel what abandonment feels like in your body. Be patient. Your body will know exactly what to do. Okay? Trust yourself. Make sure you're not mentally engaging. We're calling in the sensation alone, free of any meaning and thoughts around it. This is now a judgment-free zone. And when you do feel the fear in your body, for this example, we're using abandonment. So you're going to tell yourself, I am not afraid of being abandoned anymore. There is nothing to fear in here because I am safe in here. This is just an experience, but it is not my experience. Okay, so you stay here with the sensation of the fear in your body, but you are anchoring yourself to the knowing that you are not afraid anymore. You're literally facing your fear, but you are not allowing yourself to mentally get sucked into it. And at the same time, you keep saying to yourself these things over and over again. It might take a minute or it might take a few minutes. Sometimes it takes several sessions. Don't worry about it. Just stay here until you feel relief, and you will know that for yourself. This method is severing that mind-body connection to the fear and essentially making it meaningless. I swear, every single time I do this method to address any fear, I become mentally stronger, I feel lighter, I end up feeling safer within myself, I feel in control of what I allow myself to internally experience and identify with, and the best part is I feel my fears and resistance dissipating on a deeper level. You'll feel a lot better when you come out of this. And you'll want to continue doing this until you become unfazed and neutral to the fear. You can do this with any fear. For example, you can ask yourself, what would it feel like if I never saw my specific person again? What would it feel like if they married someone else? What would it feel like if my specific person didn't choose me? And these are actually pretty useful because a lot of you are way too attached to your specific person, and honestly, your fears around them are really blocking you and keeping you stuck. But believe me, when those fears are out of the way, your manifestations really take effortlessly, and it'll be nice not to constantly be kicked out of the state of the wish fulfilled because there's no fear taunting you. It should also take care of a lot of your double-mindedness and resistance. You should appreciate the beauty of this because it puts the power back in your hands. It really puts into perspective that you are the operant power, nothing more and nothing less. This is really how you start to detach yourself from your fears, because this is some deep subconscious level work. This is not like the cute little persistent repeating your affirmations 10,000 times and drive yourself crazy and somehow you're gonna get your manifestation rhetoric. Honestly, that really needs to stop because it's messing so many people up. I mean, sometimes that can work for things that are not a big deal to you, but the problem is when people think that's going to work for the significant things and they have major stories attached to them, like a specific person. So please do not fall into that trap. This is sustainable and should anchor you to your new healthy identity for the long haul. Anyways, let me know if you try this. If you're anything like me, initially you might be apprehensive to this approach, but you're going to learn to love it because you'll manifest so much faster instead of being stuck in a cycle where you're fighting with your mind all of the time. Alright, so that's all I have to say. So thanks for listening and I hope this helps.